Dr. Juliana. Welcome to Dying to Live. Thanks so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get into this subject and talk a little bit more about your work with folks and really helping folks become more authentically themselves through their sexual lives.
Yes, it's my favorite subject.
I'm in the death space, you're in the sex space. And so I think we both probably find it really fun when we find people that want to talk in depth about the subjects we're passionate about.
It's so true. We find each other and we can talk for hours, and it's a special group. I mean, we know that it's a risk to be in these topics. It is in some ways taboo, but it's really wonderful when you feel comfortable talking about something that a lot of people feel uncomfortable talking about.
Yeah. And so we talk a lot on here about doing something that you're afraid of anyway, doing it anyway. And that's really one of the great ways that you can signal to your central nervous system that you've actually got it taken care of. You've got it covered. And I'm a little nervous for this conversation today because I try to be really authentic and transparent, and I want to have a good, robust conversation. And I know lots of people are listening and gonna, maybe hear things about me that they haven't before. So I'm excited and scared at the same time.
It's a perfect place to begin then.
Yeah. So I thought we might start today because the world lost a great woman recently, back in October, when Betty Dodson died. And I know that you know her personally and have worked with her.
Mm-hmm.
So I was hoping you might just say a few words. And this episode is dedicated to her work and her life.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And the body sex community will love this, being dedicated to her. So yeah, I feel so lucky that I was able to meet her and become a friend and colleague of hers for many years. I actually taught her and used her book, Sex for One, as a textbook for my class at Women Mary. And when I was found out that she was still doing workshops, and I literally got the last slot of that year and the last workshop, and I flew myself up there and met her. But to bypass the body sex workshop part of it and speak about Betty, I've only known two individuals that were even similar in constitution, that were examples of somebody living their life completely authentically and with no apologies. And Betty was really such a force. She had this gift of saying the outrageous thing first so that other people could risk, and whatever they said was going to be less than whatever big thing she had just said. And at first it was funny and like, after you heard it a few times, you realize that's what she did. But then it didn't take long to also realize what a gift it was, because she wanted to have authentic conversations immediately. One of the things that was great about being around her and meeting her in her older age, she died at 91, was that she was like, I don't have time for BS. I don't have time for anything that's not interesting. And to her, and you could be in a conversation with her. Luckily, it never happened to me, but I saw it happen to other people, that she would literally get up in the middle of a conversation and walk off.
Oh my
gosh.
If
she didn't find what you were saying interesting, which felt scary, or she'd yawn, or she'd just close her eyes and take a nap. And again, like, that's a lot of personality to be able to do that. But it was actually also just fabulous, because it was, again, she wasn't worrying about what other people thought. She was like, if it's interesting, great. And if it's not, then I'm going to peace out and do something else. But what I loved too about that, although it was disarming to witness, was that what she considered interesting was someone who was being authentic. So if you were saying something authentic and you were saying something that was real and risk-taking, it was an opinion, she didn't have to agree with you at all. In fact, she loved having disagreements, but she wanted you to have a stance, and she wanted you to say something real. She had no time left for chit chat and for idle conversation. She wanted to get straight to it. So she would literally meet you and then say, so like, tell me about the best sex you've ever had, or tell me your biggest shame. Or she'll tell you something that she just masturbated to and she want to know what you did. And, again, that can be very, off-putting, or it could be very intimidating if you weren't used to it or you never experienced that before. But then again, like once you were around her a couple of times, or you were in the community that was supporting the body sex community, you knew how to get into it. And then it became exciting to meet people that you could cut through the chase and get right to it. You could say the hardest things on your heart. You could say the biggest things that were on your mind or shame, and not even know the other person's last name. You just knew that was part of the atmosphere and what Betty expected. Actually, the other thing about Betty that it was a real honor to know is that she had a gift of having everyone she did speak to feel very seen. And you often felt like you're the only person in the room. It could be a room of 100, but if she talked to you and zeroed in on you, you were the only one she saw. And that's a beautiful gift.
Oh my gosh, that is all a full package of beautiful gifts. I loved what you said about how she just didn't have any time left for bullshit and those things. But we all don't, right? We don't.
That's correct.
We don't know how much time we have, and I love this topic so much because it blows people's minds when you say, well, actually, you might not have a disease, you might not be truly physically dying right now, but you're dying actually every day. So when you put it within that framework, we don't have any time left for bullshit. I love that she didn't play into that. Off-putting, yes, but also you get to the heart of things so much quicker.
And if you wanted to connect with Betty, then you had to work very hard and very quickly to shed yourself of that and get straight to the truth in your essence. And then she's going to talk with you. And that's also fascinating. Like, wouldn't it be just amazing if we did that more often with each other? Like, Liz, how are you doing? Great, wonderful. Okay, but really, let's talk about this. It would change a lot for us.
Oh, it would. That plus what you said about how you felt really seen. She really saw everybody. Those components right there, just, looking ahead a little bit into this conversation, have to be key components of intimacy and relationships that a lot of people are missing. So the fact that she kind of walked that in her everyday life through every interaction is amazing. What a model for us all.
It is. Really, it is. And where I felt the closest with her and most aligned is that we had this one thing, we had a lot in common, but the one piece that really matters to my work too is that I really believe that everyone's story matters. And that was part of her making you feel seen, is she's heard thousands of people talk and tell their stories or snippets of their stories, and every time it mattered. And that's how I feel too. Like, I just could sit and listen to people's stories all day long, which I often do. And it changes people, like when they're seen and when their story matters, to have at least one person just say, I'll give you 5 minutes or 2 hours to sit and talk with me. And that's also the gift that Betty gave too.
Oh, I wish I could turn this computer that I'm recording on around, because somebody has made me a letterpress Your Story Matters that sits right over there. I can't show.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I had to see it afterwards. That's amazing. That's one of my favorite phrases. Yes.
I've had full body chills like 5 times in this conversation already. So stars align.
Yes.
Well, okay. So with this then, how are you doing really in this wonderful COVID and multi-layered situation that we have here in the US right now?
Oh, thank you for asking that. It's interesting how little we ask that specific question. So I appreciate it. I would say overall, I have made the effort to focus on the good that's happening around me and what I'm seeing through it. The hard parts are that although the blessing is that my business and company is thriving, people are really needing therapy and coaching right now. The intensity of people's needs and the stress and strain that so many are under, it's difficult. I've had to do a much different level of self-care at the end of my day to transition from my work heart to my family life that I didn't have to do previously. But you know, it's all manageable. It's just, it took me a bit to get there. And then I have kids of two different ages. So I have a 21-year-old who is in college, and then I have a little girl who's about to turn 7 next week. So I'm navigating two very different education systems too. And that is challenging at times, but I've lucked out that my daughter is in a pod school with 5 other families. And we hired a private teacher to teach them. And that has been a huge blessing for her to still have a few kids to be around. And then we have a wonderful teacher that's teaching, because our schools are all online.
Oh yeah, that's huge. I know a few families that have been able to do that, and not only is it such a benefit for the kids, of course, because they still get to be with kids and they get that one-on-one in person with the teacher, but also just for parents to be able to manage all the things.
Yes. Yeah, when I first started doing it before the podcast began, she would come out and I'd have to do little like thumbs up on the side, because she like, can I have this ice cream like behind the screen? I was like, oh my heavens, like this is not going to be sustainable in it. But the other thing too that I've actually felt really blessed about is I work with people all over the world. So I have an interesting perspective with my clients of hearing those in Europe or Australia who are in a different place with COVID than we are here, that I can see things coming ahead as what, like the hard parts of how people were handling, especially when we first began and they were already shelter in place. I had 3 or 4 months ahead of how to help my clients that were here, of what to anticipate, what to plan for emotionally, as well as plan for logistically. And now that we're in a different wave of it, I'm seeing those things again. But I also get to see a very large picture of how humanity is pulling together. And that has been a beautiful part of how I'm doing, as well as I try to look at that and focus on that part of it. But, you know, every day it's different. How are you?
Thank you for asking. Yeah, every day it's different. I totally hear you on the toolbox element of it. I have definitely also had to look at my very already robust, mental and emotional support toolbox, and some things just aren't working anymore. And some things I'm employing more, like taking a bath, getting in water is a big way for me to ground and release. And
every night, I do it every night. And so
every night.
You say that, yes,
me too.
Huge self-care.
Yeah, in the early, so my day job is with a retailer, a brand, and heading up marketing. And in the early days of COVID, we really had to go back to the drawing board and reinvent everything that we had planned to do this year. And there were some days when it would be like, I'd be like, well, it's a 3 bath day. I'm going back to the bathtub, and just
yes,
whatever had to be done in that toolbox. And I've continued to evolve it as well. But the parenting thing now, I have a 13-year-old who just turned 13. She was way over me anyway. She's way over me now.
Right. Yes.
So like sharing intimate space with somebody who is naturally evolving toward their friend group more and trying to facilitate in different ways so that she can still get what she needs from that right now is interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good word. Interesting. Yeah. It's a paragraph all in that one word. Mm-hmm.
Hopefully we're all coming away with more and more tools and insights about ourselves that we can leverage in the future. That's
agreed.
The positive.
Yes, agreed.
What are you seeing in, the dating and relationship world now in this time that we're in?
It's varied. For some, it is, I'm not ready to date. I don't want to date. I don't want to try to do it virtually. So I'm just going to hibernate and do other things and focus on other ways of companionship and connection until this is over, whatever over means. And then I have others who are like, you know what, I'm going to try. I'm going to adapt. We're going to do something different. I want to respect where my clients are and where my friends are in either side of that. But I do think whether it's going to be a romantic relationship or not, we have to work on connecting. And virtual is the safest way for us to do it. And one of my favorite stories is a client who they were supposed to date, see each other before COVID hit, and they weren't able to do it. And he was super disappointed. So when it really became shelter in place, he sent her groceries that were the dinner that he was wanting to fix for her and recipes. Then asked her to like go, like dress what she would if they'd been on a date. He was going to do the same. They set up a Zoom. He'd sent wine to her also, and so they cooked together at the same time. And then they sat down and had dinner. He put a candle in there. I mean, just to me, that was like top notch. That's great virtual dating and sets the bar pretty high. So there's things like that, but I also think you can have a if you drink, there's a glass of wine or coffee dates that you can do that I think are just as connecting as seeing somebody in person. I've also seen like for singles groups that especially a while ago, and I think this may be happening as we get more in shelter in place over the winter months, of pods of singles getting together and like just making sure they're all safe and they feel okay doing it, but they at least get to have human contact with each other, because those are difficult. The ones that aren't able to connect daily with a child or a spouse or someone in their family, they have to have some kind of face-to-face interaction. And if you pick a pod to do it with, and I recommend that as well, as safely as possible.
Yeah. So I've been dating during COVID. I started dating again during COVID. I had been on a hiatus, and then I'd done some Zoom dates and then some outdoor distanced walks, and I really liked it because there was no expectation for anything, no expectation or just no ability for anything more physical. And you really had to get very quickly to whether or not you liked the person as a person. And so I thought it was more efficient and also a little bit old fashioned and kind of fun. And then the conversation when it did progress around sex was interesting too, because all of a sudden you're not necessarily just checking in about whether or not you've both been STD tested, but whether or not you've been COVID tested. And so it's a whole other layer to it that we haven't had before.
And I think the communication skills that we are all going to walk out of COVID with is going to be extraordinary and a very good thing for relationships all around. And it is true. Like, it does sound like especially back in the day when HIV testing was a big deal, or even STI testing, was that everyone like shows up with their COVID test. I'm like, have you gotten tested? Me too. Or like, I'm not, or you judge people who haven't, depending on where you fall on the continuum of that. And if you haven't had your test, you're not willing to, like, well, that tells me a lot if we're going to be aligned with each other. Right. I think the other part of it too is, do you ask before you all meet for the first time, if it's in person, are we going to hug or shake hands? Like, have you negotiated that detail or not?
You know, when I was doing that, it was during pretty heavy lockdown. And so there was actually just no reason to have that conversation. It was 6 feet apart, masked, no touching, a little wave or a fist bump without touching or something.
Right. Yes.
So we didn't have to negotiate it, but I would imagine people do now.
Yeah, I recommend it just so it's not awkward. Your first meeting isn't just, out the gate, like, what are we doing with it? But we're going to be able to communicate a lot better in dating for those who are practicing it. And I think it's great. It sounds like you've had fun with it.
I have. I think the situation too has almost given me permission to approach it differently than I have in the past, with getting very quickly in a very Betty way to the things that are important to me and asking those hard questions off the bat or having those conversations right away. Like, I'm also 43 years old. So, I'm not 20 looking to get married and have kids right now. I don't want to waste time. If we're not going to be ethically aligned, it's a fuck no for me.
Yes.
So,
yes. Yes. I talk about the double hell yes, that's what you want to feel and have when you meet somebody, or when you've had at least 2 conversations with somebody.
Oh, I love that. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, like that feeling of if you really weren't going to invest, especially if you're going to be judicious about your time and energy with somebody, that sometimes you get it on the first interaction, but at least by the third, you want to feel like that person is a double hell yes. Like, it's just like, hands down, that person aligns. I want to know more. They want to know me. This feels absolutely right. And that doesn't mean like we're going to get married tomorrow, but you think well of that person and you can't wait to learn more. And every time you stop the interaction, you want more. there and you feel good about yourself and about that time spent with them. That's a double hell yes.
Oh my God. I love that. Patent that right now or trademark it or whatever. I love that so much. I actually keep coming back to that too. So he lives 3 hours away. We're a little bit long distance. But you know, every interaction therefore is meaningful. And so I've really been, you know, leaning into that double hell yes concept without knowing it and coming away from every interaction thinking, okay, yeah, this is great. Keep going. But it's a great little checkpoint.
That's wonderful. So how long has it been?
About 4 months.
Wonderful. That's great. And that's great to continue to have those feelings and to keep getting to know each other in that way.
Yeah,
great.
Kind of employing that idea, that concept of curiosity, right? Being just continually curious about the other person.
That's one of my favorite words I always tell my clients, just remain curious, especially even in dating, that if you find somebody that isn't the right match, but still remain curious and open to what that means, not necessarily that person, but the qualities or what you're learning about yourself. And so whenever somebody like has a date or a relationship that ends, I always say you need to go through 3 things. You need to figure out what that relationship or that interaction taught you about yourself, about relationships or like that kind of dating in general, and then what you're looking for that's more aligned for you.
I love that. I love that. Well, I want to know a little bit more about you and your journey as well. Kind of where you started, and you can interpret that any way you want, to where you are now, and kind of your personal evolution.
Great. It is. So it's funny. So where I've landed is that I'm a therapist who specializes in sexuality. I have several different niches within that, but in general, that's what I do. But I began as a kindergarten teacher. So when I was in college, that's what I learned to do, elementary education. And then my first job was as a kindergarten teacher. And it's funny to think like, how did I get there to here? And so when I've come back to the near the town where I went to undergrad and reconnected with a lot of college friends, like, wow, what happened between now and then? Like you didn't seem like the person that was going to get into sex and sexuality, which I get that a lot. And at first I was kind of like, well, what does that even mean to be a person that's into sex and sexuality? And why do I not supposedly fit into that? And at first that used to feel just, I don't know, off-putting, but it doesn't now. Now I get it. It's still just part of the conversation of where does sexuality fit into our world. For me, I was always a very naturally curious person. I always wanted to ask questions. And I saw that when I asked questions about sex and sexuality, everything felt different. And I wanted to know why about that. And then I just wanted to know the nuts and bolts anyway. I remember in 7th grade, our gym teacher was doing our sex ed class. And she said, and I remember she was this like hot little track coach. And I thought, okay, she's going to know all. She's going to know, she's going to tell us. I'm about to walk away from this hour with all the juice on this. And she started off saying, everyone's going to write a question down. Anyone, you can ask anything you want. And I had so many questions, I didn't even know how to narrow it down into one. So the question that I wrote down was, what's the deal with discharge? And I was like, I can't wait. Who knows what this is? I'm going to find it. And I folded it in a way that I knew when she's going to get to it, because I have this terrible habit of turning red if I'm embarrassed or I'm caught off guard. And I was like, I didn't want anyone to know what my question was, but so I could prepare myself when she did it. And when she got to mine, she opened it up. Couldn't wait to figure out what her answer was going to be. And she put it aside and said, inappropriate.
No.
Yes.
What?
No. Yes. So nobody knew it was me. I was dying inside and I couldn't understand why was this inappropriate. And she had said any question.
That's a bodily function.
It is. And I could have thought of a lot more inappropriate questions than that. So I remember, and I really think that's where the seed was planted for me. Although it wasn't life altering for me to have that experience, I remember it, I mean, really very detailed, and thought, I don't ever want anyone to feel that way again. One, to be set up like that, even though I'm sure she didn't mean to. But if anyone wanted to ask a question, I wanted to be able to answer it. And I wanted them to not feel shame. And I wanted it to feel normal to ask this, because even though my 7th grade self didn't understand this, in words. I think I understood it in a cellular way, that sexuality is one of the few things we all have in common. We all have it. And why can't we talk about it normally? Why can't it be something that is so much more a part of our education and part of our culture of self-development? So that's really where as I left kindergarten and kindergarten teaching and went into counseling, I realized that's more what I was interested in. Whenever I had a class or a topic that came about sexuality, I was the one that was always asking and answering it. And I had a professor when I was getting my doctorate take me aside and say, you need to be working in this field. Not many people go into it. You obviously love it. You should do what you love. Everyone else was going into different specialties and becoming professors. My degree is in teaching therapists how to become a therapist. And she's like, I think you need to do something else. And so I was the only one for many years ahead and behind that went into private practice and didn't go into becoming a professor right away. I was teaching at Women Married, but it wasn't my main job. And then when I was teaching this class called Restructuring Female Sexuality. Several of my students said, this is amazing. We love this. But it shouldn't just be here. This should be something that everybody has access to. And it was a very activist program. And so it was a very worldly part of it. And I thought, well, actually, you're right. Maybe I should. But when you do, when you work in academia, anything that you do is the university. So I knew I had to leave as a part of it. I also had gotten remarried and stayed home to blend the kids for a while. And when I went back into private practice and wanted to take this coursework, it began as something called Be Your Own Sexpert, because the premise that I really believe in is that I am an expert within sexuality, but I'm not yours. And it really serves you much better and serves our community much better if I teach you how to become your own expert. And what that really means is we're going to go back through everything you've ever learned about sex and sexuality, and we're going to deconstruct it. And we're going to talk about it in a global way, and then we're going to talk about it in your own life. And by the end of the examination, you will have sifted through it, almost like we're cleaning out the closets of our messages, and you will know what your opinion is on every part of a holistic look at sexuality. Not what someone told you should think and feel, and not based on what your history is, but where you are right now. And it's had all these iterations through over a decade, and it's now a course called Revealed. And it's my flagship course, and it's in 5 countries right now, and should be in 10 starting in January. And it's the thing I'm most proud of, and it's making to me the most difference in the work that I'm doing. And 2 years ago at Betty's 90th birthday celebration, she invited me, her and Carlin invited me to teach it to all the body sex facilitators. And I got to teach my class in front of Betty. She sat in the audience. About every 3 minutes, she's like, what'd she say? And she couldn't hear half of what I was saying. But afterwards, she came up to me and gave me the Betty stamp of approval and said how proud she was, and said, this is going to change the world. Please do it. And that felt just amazing. And so I have had another wind under my sail to live this on in memory of Betty as well.
Wow. So what was that like for you, both to make the decision, hey, that maybe, teaching kindergarten wasn't where you wanted to spend the rest of your life. And then, instead of staying in academia or going deeper in academia, to really do what it sounds like not many, if anybody, was doing in your programs.
Yes. Not easy, not easy, but I have found I don't often take the easy path into things, which is fine. Yes. Yeah. So, and I thrive in challenges. I'm okay with being different. A lot of ways. I mean, I obviously sometimes have an internal struggle with it, but in general, I'm not afraid to try, especially if I really check in with myself and it feels right. I have worked very hard to trust my instinct and to listen to my body, and to listen to the thoughts that aren't fears, to really guide me. And when I do, when I'm in alignment with my own agency, then things work out. Even if it's a hard road, it's a road that feels true and authentic, and things seem to happen. And there are ripple effects that feel right.
Mm.
So, and I even did this. One of the bigger things I did too at one point, much earlier in my life, is I stopped kind of everything that I was doing, and I moved to LA to pursue acting,
Oh,
and
wow.
that was extremely unpopular for a lot of people in my life. And I got lots of concerned phone calls, and what are you doing? And it was a huge risk to do that. And I didn't stay there, but I'm grateful for it. I can't tell you how much it changed a lot for me in my personal life. And I look back at that, I think, wow, I had a lot of chutzpah to go do that. And I had a young son with me. And ultimately, I decided it wasn't right to raise him there, and that I wasn't, I wasn't going to be able to make it. I wasn't able to last long enough to make a career that I could sustain him and me for it. And that's when I ended up getting my doctorate. I went back and went to Winmere and moved back to the East Coast. But I loved every second there, and I'm very glad that I did it. Just willing to take a risk and willing to live with the consequences, intended and unintended. That is a concept that's changed my life also.
You know what I love about that too is that you were, well, maybe you were afraid, but you did it anyway. You went to LA, you pursued this thing. And then when you decided, hey, this isn't working out the way I wanted it to, or this isn't the path for me, you made the alternate decision. And, I think it takes a lot of letting go of ego to be able to say, you know what, this wasn't the best decision for me. And now here's the next decision that I'm going to make, because that's really what life is just a series of checking in with where you are now and the decisions that are going to be best for you and the path that you want to take. But so often we get caught up in that ego aspect of, well, now, if I made this decision and people had a lot to say about it, and what are they going to say then if I make the opposite decision now? How's that going to reflect on me? Well, it reflects that you're an adaptive person who's now making a different decision for herself.
Yes, yes. I mean, and again, not all of it's easy. And I can't say that every time I made a decision or a risk that I didn't at times go, oh, what? Well, but I've never done anything impulsively. I've always thought everything through, and then I've always checked in with myself. And I'm not afraid to pivot. I think that's the thing too, is nothing has ever felt like it absolutely couldn't be changed. If it no longer served me or served for what I was wanting, the purpose of my life.
Mm.
But again, that isn't always a popular way of living, and that has taken some shoring up to be able to withstand the concerns or the questions. But I also found too, most people like hearing how you do it. It's similar
Mm-hmm.
to Betty's, like when someone's living kind of I'd say I'm kind of unapologetic. I'm not Betty level yet, but I'm working towards that. A lot of people want to live like that. They want to live with their decisions and have ownership of their decisions. And when you meet somebody who's doing that and taking those kind of risks, it's interesting to have those conversations with them just to see, and then adapt it to your own life and see what that fits. Not everyone needs to move to LA or become a sex therapist by any means, but everyone has their own chances to make decisions, either small changes in their life or bigger ones.
Yeah, it gives people permission just to think about the possibilities that are available to them, and I like to call it rewriting the life prescription.
Ooh, love
We
that.
all had a life prescription that were probably written for us by family, by community, by how we grew up. That we have all of the ability to rewrite for ourselves in a way that allows us to live closer to our heart and more authentically. But I mean, that's never talked about. We don't really get permission for that. So the more that we can illustrate permission through talking openly about the decisions that we make in our lives and the risks that we take, I think is beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree, and I love that phrase too. And I don't want this next statement to be so gendered, but there is a gendered aspect to it. That so often those who are female identified are raised to be people pleasing,
Mm-hmm.
and to have decisions made for them. That it's really a skill you have to hone
Oh,
to know how to make decisions, know how to live with these decisions, to not worry or to not make decisions based on pleasing others and losing yourself in the process. It's not just women identified people, but it is particularly there when I've talked to people and asked and through my research.
oh yeah, I would 100% agree with that. Just the boundary work needed
Yes.
as maybe somebody raised female or female identifying, I think is pretty huge. I've experienced that myself. I'm still working on it.
Yep, same. Yes. Work in progress.
Work in progress.
Mhm.
Well, I wondered if you might have kind of to help us end today, maybe a few tips for people. And I've been thinking about, you have such body centered work in the body. And you said something really great a few minutes ago about listening to yourself. And I think that is also a skill that we have to hone and practice because depending on how we all grew up and the communities that we were raised in, I'm not sure we all get that lesson early in life. So, do you have any tips for people to really get into their body, to really feel and hear their intuition, and then allow that to kind of drive their decision making and their path forward?
I love that question. And the first thing that I say is it's not necessarily as natural as you think because we're not taught the skill. So to open yourself to being curious about the process and not make yourself wrong or not feel terrible if it doesn't come to you readily. The next thing is I ask people to think about a time when a situation or interaction went poorly, and I take them back and like, okay, let's talk about what were your feelings. What did you feel in your body when you feel stress? How does your body interact with you and let you know, like, what are your body signals? For some, it's like their stomach hurts, or they like get gassy, or they can't eat, or their face gets red, whatever it is. And so I go through. Like, people already know the answer; they just haven't had it phrased to them in that way. So if you phrase it differently, they can attune to their body a little bit better. And then we start looking back. I'll take a couple examples of times they made a clear decision that they were making a decision and it went awry. I call those unintended consequences, and go through, okay, so where were the points where your body started changing, that you had changes that were signaling to you? And most of the time you can get there and experience it and have those cues for yourself. And I asked them about how they overrode it. So what were the thoughts that overrode your body telling you that this wasn't feeling right, this wasn't going okay? And that's always an interesting conversation. Then we kind of sidestep and do a lateral move and look at fear, because fear can be a very confusing, intuitive body communicator. Sometimes it's perfect for us. It's like, thank goodness our body can react to fear and that we can be discerning. But sometimes our fear is overprotective and misguides us. So I like to talk a little bit more about how to figure out what is fear that's being helpful, that's a red flag of a decision or a person that we need to absolutely listen to. And then what is the fear that doesn't want to get hurt again, that doesn't want to feel something terrible or have something go wrong, and try to tell the difference between the two. And that again is the same process of going back into other stories and writing the details down and having someone else hear and witness it with you. And then it's practicing moving forward. It's making smaller decisions that you can tune in, having mindful practices that you remain present. For some, meditation really works. Some people don't like meditation, or they can go to prayer if that's easier for them and more aligned with their upbringing. Others, it is, I just ask them to just like sit outside, lay if they have grass, and just don't think at all, and check in and see, like, is this feeling right or is it not? And don't overthink the process. It doesn't have to be something that you're sitting there in this position and chiming and, you've got somebody with, bowls around you, although I love those experiences too. I want people to realize that everyone can access the truth of themselves and the essence of who they are, especially if they can slow things down in their life and believe in it. And then you start making decisions that you stand behind. You start learning how to handle when decisions go in ways that you don't think, either better or worse, because that's often the biggest hindrance we have to our authentic self, is believing that it's going to hurt or be hard if we get it wrong. And so then we stop making decisions and we stop trusting ourselves. But really, it's not ourselves that we don't trust, is we don't trust how we're going to handle when things go the way we don't want them to.
So you're kind of building up the confidence in folks to be able to handle what comes their way. I love what you said
Resiliency.
Resiliency. Yes. I love what you said about fear too, because our brains can't distinguish whether we're being chased by a woolly mammoth or whether we're nervous about the presentation that we're about to give. It's the same feeling, but I don't think a lot of us know that. So when you put it in that framing, then okay, yeah, this presentation does feel like a woolly mammoth, and you can start to normalize it.
Yes, absolutely. I had this experience last fall, the last speaking gig that I had, that I was speaking about sex to a group of 1,600 realtors. And that alone felt very intimidating to do. Writing it was the hardest part ever. Like, well, how am I was the kickoff speaker for the event. And so I did all this talk thinking I had everything right. I felt like I had a very catchy beginning, but I had never been to a realtor convention before. So as I was miking up and they were getting me ready, I was like, is this the music that they're gonna be playing as they go on? And my first actual lines was that I was going through that houses are the stories of our lives, often like with the homes that we've lived in or the apartments. And I thought that was great.
That's great.
But the music that was leading me on was like, boom, boom. It was like a party. It was like this rave party, which I did not realize that it was like hype time. And I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, when I walk on and it's a picture of my house in Alaska, is the house I was born in. It's like, this is going to be a big shift in between, this bumping music of everyone like, woo, like partying up to like, this is Kodiak Island. And, and literally I had about 4 minutes of terror of like, I can't change this. They already have the slides. Like, what am I going to do? And how am I going to gather this? And what I had all the awful thoughts. You're going to fail. You've got an hour. They're going to hate you. You have 1,600 people waiting for you. This was like this huge gig. And anyway, so I literally just checked in with myself and I was like, okay, you are not being chased by a woolly mammoth. This is just music. It's going to be fine. If the first of it sucks, it's fine. The rest of your speech is going to be great. And you live through it. You live through awkwardness, and you can live through a realtor talk not going like you want it to. And that's truly like just being authentic and checking in, like, I got this. I got it, even if some of it's hard. And that's not always easy to get to in our lives.
I mean, I guess I wouldn't have even thought that realtors would be that much fun to need a hype show, but that's really awesome to hear.
It was fun.
That they invited you. I mean, that's amazing.
Yes, it really was. It was a great realtor group. Like, they were just incredibly, very forward thinking. But I next time, now I know, I put on my rider, what is the song that I'm walking out to?
That's a really good idea.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, in true COVID fashion, I have to return the computer I'm recording on right now to my 13-year-old so she can continue her school day, which is just how we do things these days. So tell people where they can find you.
Right now on Instagram at Dr. Juliana Hauser. It's Hauser and Juliana with one N, or my website at dr-juliana.com. And I'm on Facebook as well with Dr. Juliana.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the chat today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was just wonderful talking with you.
You too.